Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting up some Bladeguard veterans because I still have a second indomitus box that I never did anything with, and this will be good for some practice and trying out some stuff. So I will be painting these guys in the style of the Blood Angels. Unfortunately, these models are the original basic ones, which are sort of pushed to fit, so when it comes to assembly they had to be unfortunately fully assembled except for their shields and sword arms. And so I primed them with general purpose gray car primer. And so while that was drying, I then took Liquitex modeling putty and then I applied this on a base layer of all their bases to add some like depth, height, and stuff like that. And with Dawnstone, Pallid Witch Flesh, White Scar White, and I don't show it here, but Lamy and Medium, we're going to do the pre-shading. So first, Dawnstone, with an airbrush from the underneath, and we're going to apply the shadow. Then with Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to airbrush from above and apply the light. So we're going to have the light to dark. And then we're going to take White Scar White in a dry brush, and we're going to dry brush all over. And then we're going to take White Scar White mixed with a little bit of Lamy Medium to make it flow better, and we will use a brush and we will apply it onto the major edges of armor plates and stuff like that didn't show up too well in the dry brushing phase. Alright, with a bunch of paints that are pictured here that I didn't use because this is what I thought I was going to do. It did not work out that way. I screwed up. So with Lamy and Medium mixed with Mephiston Red, we create our usual wash, and I apply it all over the red armor. However, here's where I screw up. So when I applied this on, the Mephiston Red looked really pink. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I looked at that and I was like, this is bad, so I will apply a second coat. And that completely undid all the highlights and everything else and just flattened the whole model. So I completely screwed up right there because I didn't notice it at the time. Like when the Mephiston Red one applied, it turned out really pink on the white undercoating, and that looked bad. But then, like, I don't know what I was thinking. I should have just kept with it because the perfect highlights and everything was there, and then the oil paints would have done well. So I really screwed up right here. So I should have just kept doing with what well, no, just with Lamy Medium, Mephiston Red, and a single coat, because I've got the proportions down right, and then applying a second one, flattened the whole model and got rid of all the undercoating. And then with Burnt Sienna and Chromium Red or something, it's a nice red, I create this brownish reddish color. So this is going to be the shading, and I make a wash with it. And so we're going to just do our usual. We're going to apply a thin layer all over. We're going to wipe on the major areas or most of the model, so it's only in the recesses. We will then reapply a second coat once it dries, usually with the help of a hair dryer, and then I don't show it, but we will wipe again on the most major areas where the light is hitting for better shading and color transition. But I'm trying to fix a problem at this point. Alright, feeling a little less self-confident, I broke up the next step into a bunch of smaller steps because I wasn't sure I wouldn't screw it up after that last mess up. So I made a wash with Eshin Gray and Lamy Medium and applied it to all their cloaks. Essentially their cloaks are supposed to be like blackish, so this will be an off dark gray and will pretty much do all the cloaks pretty well. However, I really screwed up with the red painting and I got a little bit of the red on the cloaks and other places, so that kind of messed up the pre-coating here. So I ended up applying 2 coats of this in some areas just to cover up the red. And then with lamp black, I make a wash and apply this all over their cloaks and stuff, and including their chest piece as well. And I do wipe off screen just a little bit on the cloaks, the most raised areas. And then with Eshin Gray and Dawnstone, I then use this, and I also get Administrative Gray. I show it a little bit later. But basically, I do a mix of Eshin Gray mixed with Dawnstone and do highlights on the cloak on the most raised areas, covering like 40 to 50% of the cloak. Then I do pure Dawnstone and a little bit of mix. And then I mix Administrative Gray into it. And basically I go from dark to light, and then I do very fine highlights on the most raised areas. Alright, moving on. With Ulthuan Grey Air and Pallid Witch Flesh, I'm going to paint the white on the shields. Basically, Ulthuan Grey Air is a good cover. It can cover dark colors and stuff well, and it flows well, and paint that flows off the brush very well and easily makes painting very easy. So basically, I just painted what was going to be white with Ulthuan Grey, and then I applied Pallid Witch Flesh in sort of the center-ish to transition from an off-white to a much wider off-white. Alright, now with Mournfang Brown, Agrax Earthshade, and XV88, we're going to paint the leather that they have and the gun holsters. So first we're going to start with the layer of Mournfang Brown as base. Then we're going to apply a layer of Agrax Earthshade for shading. Then we're going to go back with Mournfang Brown, and then we're going to highlight, covering 80 to 90% of the entire thing. Then we're going to do somewhat of a mix of Mournfang Brown and XV88, but somewhat leaning more towards XV88. And I'm going to apply straight edge lines on, well, the edges of each thing as well as the folds and such. And this is a little striking contrast, so this type, it's not subtle differences, it's strong contrasting lines. Not that strong, not like pure XV88, it's mixed in, but it's more noticeable at a distance. And now with Corn Red, Mephiston Red, and Wildwire Red, we're going to paint the wax on the purity seals. So basically, cover the whole seal in Corn Red. Then cover the center and the edges of the rings with Mephiston Red. And then a tiny dot of Wild Rider Red in the center, and like a crescent moon on the upper part of each seal. Alright, with Baneblade Brown, Agrax Earthshade, Rakarth Flesh, and Thondia Brown, we're going to paint the Purity Seal paper. So first, we're just going to paint them all in Baneblade Brown. Then we're going to apply a layer of Agrax Earthshade. How do I put this? We're going to make sure it doesn't puddle a lot or pool a lot. We just want the whole thing to color a little bit, and only in the biggest recesses do we want the Agrax Earthshade to pool. Then we're going to take Baneblade Brown again, and we're going to paint the edges of all the paper, the four corners and the big folds, as well as some parts in the center areas, where the paper folds upwards. And then we're going to take Rakarth Flesh, and we're going to paint all the edges, the most raised areas, edges, folds, and such and such. Then we're going to take Thondia Brown, we're going to water it down a bit, and we're going to take our finest brush, and we apply it onto the brush, and then we touch a paper towel with it to get rid of the excess. And then we're going to do little dots, we're not going to paint, we're not going to drag, we're going to tap, 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 and create tiny little lines of text. And there. And then with Black Templar Contrast Paint, we're just going to do this as a throwaway to get past this step. But basically the joints between the armor and these black adjusting belt thingies that are on their back, whatever. We basically paint the Black Templar Contrast Paint just to do it. Alright, with Corvus Black, Caliban Green, and I show it later, but Pallid Witch Flesh. So we're just going to paint the heraldric shields on each of the guys. And honestly, I just make this up as I go along. But basically, I paint black lines or squares, I paint green lines or squares, I mix some Pallid Witch Flesh into the green to make it lighter green, to make it blend in, I apply some Pallid Witch Flesh to make white squares or white lines, literally just making it up as I go. This is more freehand stuff, and I was like, you know what, I should at least try to expand my freehand skills since they're trash, because, well, mean, they technically would be trash because I never use them, so they're beginner level. And so this was just like something to try to get it down. Squares are really hard, lines are easier. And now for some decals. The Indomitus box set came with a huge sheet, and so the shoulder pads and their whatever shield in front doesn't have it, and it would look odd to not have it. Although I'm not the best at decals, I apply the Blood Angels decal, a campaign Blood Angels badge on the front, and a skull icon thingy for their unit. Yeah. I'm not sure. I tried to look up like heraldry for the Blood Angels, and that did not help. It was very vague. White Scars apparently has a much better catalog that's easier to find, but... And I'm not the best at applying decals, but only afterwards, that after doing all this and sealing and everything, did I find that I had a bottle of decal fix, which would really have helped. Eliminating like this white shiny stuff. Alright, we're done with the non-metals, so we're going to go with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, and I'm going to just airbrush it all on. The reason why I'm doing airbrush is because if the decals are still soft, and this is an easy way of applying a wash or a varnish on them that won't bloat away if I use a brush. And I don't show it, but like I do let it dry, and I apply several more coats of Ultra Matte Varnish onto the decals themselves to help create a layer to seal them in. Alright, with Liquitex Gloss Varnish, Runefang Air Steel, and Acrylic Ink Transparent Burnt Sienna, we're going to make a gold reddish bronze to apply. And so a lot of gloss varnish mixed with the Runefang Steel, mixed with the acrylic ink for color. We're going to apply this all over, and a little bit of water to help it flow better. And although I don't show it, like I do get a... So a lot of the places that are supposed to have metal have been just painted over with the red. I messed that up. So I go with Pallid Witch Flesh, and there's some places I just paint white as a base layer and before applying the metals on. Just FYI, and then it works out pretty well because the red paint is completely visible through this metallic layer. So somehow I forgot to get the picture of it, but basically I make an oil wash out of the burnt sienna and then I apply it onto the gold, and I also apply another layer of that onto where the decals are so that they, I don't know, maybe blend in better with the backgrounds, and it actually does help a little bit, gets rid of a little of the whiteness underneath the decals, and I apply this to the metal and such, and it works well. As well as I decide to just apply a layer of it all over the white shields to make it an off brownish white shield. Alright, with Liberator Gold and Runefang Steel, we're going to touch up the gold parts. So with Pure Liberator Gold, we're going to apply it to like the flat of their top of their heads, edges of their armor and stuff like that, the gold trim and such. Then we're going to mix a little bit of Runefang Steel into it, and then highlight again just the most raised edges and stuff. Now, normally this wouldn't be entirely needed, but when I was applying so I made the mix of paint of the brass gold, and then I painted the white, and so the brass gold dried a bit, and so it didn't flow as best as it should have. So when I applied onto the helmets, all the dark brown shading should have easily and evenly distributed, but because it was a bit dry and I didn't really notice it, and because of bad planning, it looked uneven and stuff, so I kind of had to paint over and fix the line. So normally I wouldn't have had to do this step, but I screwed up again, and so the paint dried a little too much, so it didn't evenly distribute the shading. Well, this is the best time to try out a brand new series of paints I got. I got this super white aluminum duraluminum color, but I found that it can come in a group of 4-pack, and so I got a whole pack. So I'm going to use this exhaust manifold color, this gunmetal gray, and then duraluminum. So basically dark metal to middle metal to very white metal. And I'm going to test how it works. So this apparently works for airbrushes, but you can also brush it on. So I use the darkest color on the back on pretty much everything as the metal base layer. Then I highlight it with the gunmetal gray. And then I do a fine highlight with the duraluminum, but I use the pure duraluminum to paint their power swords as a base layer. And this metallic paint flows very well. It easily goes off the brush and fills up everything, so it makes there's no struggle to paint. It just comes off easy from the brush. Alright, here's a picture of all the paints I thought I was going to use. I in fact only used 2 of them, Caliban green and Moot green. So I went to paint the first eye. I'm going to paint the eyes of the helmets, but the first eye I found out was actually insanely tiny and wasn't as large as I thought it would be because of the way the helmet is styled. And I was like, I can't fit all these colors in here, so 2 it is. So a base layer of Caliban green, then a mix of Caliban green and Moot green. And I filled in the eyes as best I could, covering 90% of it. Then I took a dot of Moot green and applied it to their back, each eye a dot furthest away from the front as a highlight. And it looked okay. Yeah, the eyes were just so tiny that I couldn't fit all these different changing colors in there. Alright, with Drakenhof Nightshade and Lamian Medium, I mix it together and then I apply it onto the power swords. How do I put this? So I apply a layer of it onto like 90% of half of the blade, and then I apply a layer to the other half, like opposite. And so I apply multiple layers over time once it dries, and then I create this light to dark effect and alternating on each side of the blade with it. It takes like 4 or 5 coats in total. And then I go back with the duraluminum, and then I just highlight the edges of the blade and the center of the blade. And then I get some Liquitex gloss varnish and I just apply it all over the blade and it makes it shine nice. So I just quickly whipped off these average bases, dirt ground and grayish grass or dead grass. I don't know, the color of hay. And so basically I then super glue the models once fully assembled onto the bases. And, well, so I didn't make proper indents into the ground. And so it's a little hard for them to stick on, so those guys will just fall off easy. So I use a electric drill once the glue has dried, and I drill through their biggest, easiest, straightest foot, and then I apply a bent into an L paperclip shard or piece in with super glue, and then that'll just seal the models onto the base. And done. 7 out of 10. Trash. So, it's how I view this is like someone put a bunch of diamonds and gems on a plastic ring. The armor really sticks out as what could have been. It isn't as well, like, there is some shading and shade in there, but it could have been so much better. So, like, as far as rating as generous it goes, it would have been a 6 for the horrible armor, but like everything else, I did my best to try to bring up the model, have some pretty decent bases to go with it. So as it stands, I'd say straight up 7 out of 10. But I can see some things that turned out really well. First off, the black capes turned out great. Went really heavy on highlighting. They look great. The wash, the paint of my style, and the oil paint really turned it into a paint by numbers, making it incredibly obvious where to highlight and stuff. The extra highlights worked wonderful. The somewhat high contrast leather or XV88 on the leather holsters and stuff really stands out, makes them sharp. The purity seals look incredible. The brass on the armor looks pretty good, and on the shields. Their chest eagle looks great. It's painted the same way as the as the cape. Like, this could have been a really high, well done model. The decals are not that good. They're not that perfectly done. Like, they somewhat take me out if I look at the model. They're like, how do I put this? They're not bad, but the surrounding area is so much better that the little flaws of the decals come out. And then the power swords look pretty good, look really good. The metal for the helmets looks really good, striking. Their eyes, very striking. Literally, this could have been a 9 out of 10, potentially 10 out of 10, but the way their armor turned out, the basic the ceramitite of the armor just did not come out as good as I did, because I screwed up with a second coat, and that really got rid of a lot of the shading. It really, really dropped it down for me. And the bases are neither great nor bad. They just go with. They don't detract, but they don't add. Yeah, so for me, this is a disappointing 7 out of 10. I feel spited, and my next, well, not necessarily the next model I paint, but like probably the character. I think I have the lieutenant and the captain. One of them will be Blood Angels, just so I can get another crack at that red armor and get it right. So yeah, so like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share any nitpicks or whatever, like it if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, share the video if you can, and I'll see you soon. Bye.